The Uber ride-sharing service provides a convenient way for passengers to travel between destinations without the need of their own car, and it also allows drivers to make money in their spare time. But many people have experienced Uber horror stories where passengers have acted out or Uber drivers have broken the law with passengers on board, in some cases resulting in lawsuits being filed. Number 5. On the 31st of March 2021, Kimberly Mariduena hailed an Uber ride intending to drive to Raleigh-Durham Airport as she was on her way to celebrate Easter weekend with her family and friends. It was pouring with rain, and so when the Uber driver arrived, she quickly walked to the car to get inside. She put most of her things in the car's trunk, but kept her backpack out, which she then placed on the back seat. She then told the driver that she wanted to make sure she had locked the front door, and that she would be back shortly. The driver said it was fine, and Kimberly, who lived on the first floor of her building, went back inside. Less than a minute later, she came back outside and realized that the driver had left with all of her belongings still in the car. This included her laptop, passport, cell phone, and wallet. She then noticed that he had turned around and was heading back in her direction, but when she tried to get him to stop, he simply ignored her and drove away. Since her phone was in the car, she asked a neighbor if she could use their phone to call 911, which she then did, but she was told to contact Uber instead. When she did so, Uber supplied her with the driver's phone number, but when she tried repeatedly to contact him, he kept telling her that he couldn't talk as he was on a ride. She then used the location feature on her iPad to track her phone and saw that the driver had traveled to the airport where she was intending to go. It would later be revealed that he did this to make it seem like he had dropped her off and completed his fare. The driver eventually returned to Durham, and Kimberly managed to convince him to return her possessions. Not only had she missed her flight home, but she then realized that Uber had still charged her $40 for the trip that she never took. Since it was Easter weekend, it cost her $400 to book a new flight for the following day. All in all, the Uber horror story ended up costing her $700, and since the driver returned her possessions, Durham police could not charge him with the crime. When Kimberly contacted Uber for a refund, she was told to contact their law enforcement team. They also stated that they could not talk to her over the phone, as all of their business is conducted via the Uber app. Number 4. Ryan Simonetti is the CEO of a company called Convene, and on the 8th of July 2014, he had ordered an Uber for himself and a few colleagues, as they needed to travel from downtown Washington to Tyson's Corner in Virginia. At one point during the ride, Simon noticed what he thought was a police officer following the car that they were in, and he asked the Uber driver if he knew what was going on. The driver told them that it wasn't a real cop and kept driving, seemingly unperturbed. But as they reached the next traffic light, he apologized and said, "I'm sorry, but we're going to have to run this red light," before taking off at high speed. The driver then headed for the 9th Street Tunnel, after which he got onto the I-395, still driving at well above the speed limit. It would later come to light that the person following them was a taxi inspector, who had spoken to the driver just before Ryan and his colleagues got into the car. The inspector had asked him whether his previous fare was a street pickup, which is illegal in the district. As the Uber driver sped away, the inspector followed and attempted to radio for help, but he got no response as the city was experiencing a 911 outage. By this point, Ryan and his fellow passengers were terrified, and for the next 10 minutes, they pleaded for the driver to slow down and stop, but their pleas fell on deaf ears. Ryan attempted to force the driver's leg onto the brake pedal, tearing his pants leg in the process, but this too was unsuccessful. He then told the driver that if he didn't pull over at the next exit, he was going to have to get physical with him, and this finally prompted him to pull over. The taxi inspector, following closely behind, managed to stop the driver from escaping by cutting him off at the top of the off-ramp. An Uber spokesperson later stated that the driver was fired and would no longer be representing their company. Number 3. In October of 2014, a Los Angeles woman who has not been named decided to book an Uber ride home from a party, but instead ended up living through a real-life horror story. After entering her home address into the app to save some time, the Uber driver arrived and she got into his car, expecting to be home shortly. But just after setting out, she noticed that the driver was taking the wrong route, and when she asked him what was going on, he ignored her. She immediately panicked and tried to give him the correct directions to her house, but the driver kept ignoring her and kept driving in the wrong direction. 20 minutes later, he pulled into a dark and empty parking lot, and the passenger tried to flee the vehicle, but the driver managed to lock her car's door before she was able to open it, and she was trapped inside with him. This prompted her to start screaming as loudly as she could, and this seemed to bring the driver to his senses, and he finally drove her to her house. The passenger contacted Uber the following day and reported the incident, but the only response she got was an automated email apologizing for the driver taking an inefficient route. Uber would later claim that the passenger was intoxicated and had asked to be driven around, stating that the driver had to call 911 to ask for help with an intoxicated passenger. They did, however, refund the passenger's trip and said that they contacted the driver for more information, as they deemed reports on the ride to be inaccurate. The woman later contacted the Los Angeles Police Department and hired an attorney, though not many further details have been released on the case. Number 2. Uber drivers often get reprimanded for being rude or abusive towards their customers. But 51-year-old Gerald Montgomery took this one step further after dropping off a passenger in March of 2015. On the 27th of March, a woman contacted the Denver Police Department after she noticed a man standing at her back door, holding the screen door open. When she asked him what he was doing there, he said that he was a friend of her roommate's and that he was there to see her. She told him that her roommate had not told her to expect anyone, and she went back into the house to contact her friend. After giving her a description of the man at the door, her roommate told her that it sounded a lot like the Uber driver that she had met that same morning. She then took a screenshot of her receipt, which showed Montgomery's face, and sent it to her friend, who confirmed that it was indeed the same man. She returned to the door to confront him, but when she got there, he had already disappeared. It would turn out that Montgomery had taken his passenger to Denver Airport as requested, and then returned to her home address where he picked her up in order to carry out a burglary. But unbeknownst to him, the passenger's roommate was home, and after discovering what he was really up to, she contacted the police. When they arrived, the woman told police that when she returned to the door to find that Montgomery had fled, she found a tensioner device, which is used to pick locks, lying on the ground. When asked if she was certain that it was the Uber driver who tried to break in, she told police that he was wearing the same cap that he had on in the Uber photo. Based on this information, Montgomery was arrested and charged with second-degree burglary, possession of burglary tools, and attempted first-degree criminal trespass. He was later released on a $10,000 bond, and the passenger was fully refunded for her scary Uber ride. Number 1. On the 15th of June, 2015, Theodora Faustenberg, Angela O'Neill, and Katie Valer had finished attending a book club meeting in Sacramento. They then ordered an Uber ride home, not expecting that it would soon turn into an Uber horror story. The driver, 36-year-old Mark Filanov, arrived to pick the women up at around 9:45 p.m., and when they attempted to make small talk with him, they noticed that he was reserved and only gave short answers to their questions. Shortly after getting onto the Capital City Freeway, Filanov started to drive erratically, drifting into the wrong lane, despite being warned by his navigation app. At first, the women thought he had just lost concentration for a moment, and when Angela told him that he needed to keep to the left, he aimed the car at the center divider before abruptly asking which way. The women yelled for him to go left, and at the very last second before impact, he swerved, correcting the car. Theodora says that at that point, she wondered to herself whether the driver thought he was being funny, but he immediately accelerated and started driving at over 80 miles per hour. The navigation app on his phone started flashing warnings about excessive speed, and this seemed to prompt him to drive normally again. But they noticed that he had adopted an intense gaze and had gotten even quieter. As they reached a more congested section of the freeway, he started tailgating other cars, and repeatedly slammed on the brakes, causing the women to be jostled around. Just before they reached the bridge across the American River, the women asked Filanov to pull over so that they could get out, but without saying a word, he stomped on the gas pedal and started speeding again. Fearing for their lives, the three women started screaming at him and pleading for him to stop, but he refused, saying, "Nope, we're all going to die tonight." Theodora, who was in the passenger seat, tried to use her phone to get help, but every time she did so, Filanov swiped at it and she resorted to leaving it in her lap while she cried. Angela, who was sitting behind Filanov, managed to grab her phone from her bag, and only after they had passed their exit was she able to contact 911, telling the dispatcher that they had been kidnapped and that the driver refused to stop the car. When Filanov was forced to stop at a red light, the women bolted and were aided by staff at a nearby convenience store. The following day, a car matching Filanov's was seen outside Theodora's home, and the three women were able to secure a restraining order against Filanov, who was fired from his job as an Uber driver. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.